name's Ketevan. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a tag video, which I haven't been doing a lot of lately, but I really enjoy the subject of this one, and I wasn't actually even tagged in it. That's how much I'm excited to do this tag. But I did see Kaitlin's video from Bandy's Books. She did the tag, and she didn't tag me, which is totally fine. But I'm going to just tag myself because I am obsessed with book clubs. I love book clubs. The answers from the questions will reveal I am quite the aficionado of book clubs, and yeah, so I just want to talk about them. So yeah, the tag was originally created by Melinda at A Web of Stories, so I'm just going to go through the questions because Kaitlin is not part of a book club, and if you are not part of a book club, there's a separate set of questions, and if you are part of a book club, there's a different set of questions. So I'm going to actually be answering totally different questions than what Kaitlin did. So the first question is, are you or have you ever been in a book club? Are you in more than one book club? Yeah, so yes, obviously, based on what I just said. And yeah, I'm in so many. Let's see. So my main book club is a feminist book club. Then there's also a queer literature book club that I go to sometimes. Then I have, there's a book club that doesn't really have a theme. My friend runs it though, so I end up going quite frequently. They just vote on a different kind of book, and there's no like requirement for the type of book they choose. And then what else? Oh, there's also an immigrant book club here in Paris that I go to pretty occasionally. Not regularly, but if I'm interested in the book, I always try to make it. And then there's a few other book clubs that I haven't actually even been to a meeting yet because I'm in so many book clubs, but if I see a book that I really want to read, I'll definitely go to their meetings. So yeah, so that's sort of my book club landscape, so to speak. In addition to those, I've also been a part of many, many failed book clubs, or, you know, let's start a book club and then nothing ever happens kind of book clubs. So my like book club journey is very recent. I don't think I've ever been in a book club. Yeah, I've never been in a book club before like the last couple of years. And right before COVID, I was like, oh, I'm going to join a book club. And I saw a post, and the vibe felt right, and the book that they chose was really interesting, and I went out and bought it. And then like 2 weeks later it was confinement, and I was like, okay. And so we said, oh, we'll just do it online. But then like obviously no one read the book because everyone was freaking out. And so it just kind of fizzled. And then so that was my first like introduction to book clubs in Paris. And I've had many more similar where someone's like, oh yeah, I want to start a book club. Like, is anyone interested in feminist books? Is anyone interested in these books? And I was like, yes, me. And like 20 to 30 other people would say, yes, me as well. And then nothing ever happened. Either, you know, we would meet, and then the book discussion was so like blah that like everyone felt like, you know, and it just kind of fizzled after a few meetings. You know, the biggest problem, people just don't actually want to read the book or don't have time to read the book. And so yeah, I was feeling very frustrated at a certain point because I was like, at that point I had joined like, I think like 3 or 4 different book clubs. And I just kept like not getting what I wanted out of a book club and what I really thought a book club was. It's obviously about the books, but obviously also it's the social component. So I was feeling blah about it. And actually Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading, she did a video. I don't remember what the video was about exactly, but it was about book clubs. Maybe it was like how to start a book club or something like that. And I remember like commenting, being like, how are you doing this? Because she has like a very long standing book club. She doesn't live in Paris, but she lives somewhere else in France. And it's an Anglo book club. So it's like, you know, it's a lot harder to have book clubs in a country where they don't speak the native language that you're trying to read in, because obviously the pool of people that are potentially interested is much smaller. Granted, I don't think Paris is, I mean, like, what am I complaining about? Like, Paris is fine, but it was still like, I was feeling so frustrated, and I was like, how do you do it? Like, what's going on? And she just wrote back with like this very long paragraph of like very nice, helpful advice. And I actually took it to heart and just, kept going, and I finally found the book clubs that I actually wanted to be a part of and actually worked for me. And honestly, also I think part of it was just that like after, you know, people were emerging from COVID, like it was a lot of stop start with a lot of things, and then it just took time for the starting to just be like long term, like no interruptions, no more confinements, no more spikes, you know, that kind of thing. So Anyway, let's get back to the questions. Alrighty, so number 2, what is your book club or clubs like? How many people are in it? How often do you meet? Does your club have a specific focus? Well, I kind of already told you the foci. I think every book club ever meets once a month. I can't imagine a different frequency, maybe like quarterly or something, but I mean, monthly is like ideal. More than that, it's like too much for most people, but less than that people forget. So I think monthly is great. How many people are in it, and what are they like? So what I like about my book clubs is that they're all different in terms of the vibes. So for example, my feminist book club, it is super chill. It's definitely like we talk for the book. It's definitely the vibe of like we talk about the book for like an hour maybe, and then the rest of it's just like socializing. But that's fine because the books that are selected are like top notch, like really great literature. And we do get into debates and stuff, and it's fun a lot of the times to discuss the book, but really it's just the people in the book club are great. So that's my favorite one. Even if I'm not interested in the book, I'll usually read the book just to go to the meeting. And I think that's the only one I actually like really do that. Yeah, that's the only one I would do that for. Like I'm like, I don't really like the book, but I'll still read it. On the other hand, a lot of the other book clubs, specifically the immigrant book club, the queer lit book club, and actually there is there's 2 feminist book clubs in Paris. The other one that I haven't been to yet, I've heard is also this style of very formal. Like there is no discussion of anything other than the book. It's like this is a literary discussion, and there's like prompts that you're given either ahead of time or in the beginning, or there's the moderator or group leader like asks the questions, and it's very much like one person talks and everyone listens. Like it's very like classroom like, which is fine because like obviously if you want to really have like a book discussion, you know, drinking wine and having fun is probably not what you want. But yeah, it's definitely a little harder to like get to know people because you're not getting to know them. You're just getting to know their opinions on the books. So that's why I prefer a little bit more heavier socialization than that. But I still go to those book clubs when I'm interested in the book because that's what they do. They literally just discuss the book. So if I like the book or I want to talk about the book, I'll go because that's what they're there for. And then the other book club that doesn't have a theme, it's a nice mix of both as well. Like there's socializing and then there's the book club discussion, which is really nice. It's just that sometimes I don't like the books that they've picked, and I'm not interested in the books because I haven't read them yet. But I know that I'm not interested in them. Like it's a popular book that I've already said, not going to read that. And then, so I'm not going to force myself to read a book that I already know I don't want to read, if that makes sense. So was that everything in question 2? How many people? Oh, how many people are in it? See, that's the thing. Like, for example, the themeless book club, in person, like when we actually meet, it's usually less than 8 people. But it's born of this Facebook group that has almost 1,000 people in it. And so that's what I also tell people, like when they're like, oh no, we only like 30 people have already signed up, I can't take more people. I'm like, no, like maybe 20% of the people will actually show up because that's just how book clubs work when you're working with strangers or new groups or whatever. Yeah, so same thing with my feminist book club. There's like at least 50 people in the group, and really like, I mean, the biggest meeting we've ever had is 15 people, 1-5, and mostly it's like 8 to 10 maybe, which I think is better. Like smaller groups are better. So yeah, just for me personally, I prefer a little bit of a smaller group just because I think the conversations are easier to follow for my hearing, and also just more focused in general. Alrighty, so number 3, what book generated the best book club discussion in your experience? So yeah, this one, I always recommend this when people are like, what should I suggest for my book club? I always say this because I had the best book club discussion of my life, Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier. It was fantastic. Like, I mean, everyone knows it's a good book. But the discussion was amazing because some people in the room, I mean, this is a spoiler, so spoiler, I'll maybe put the timestamp to like jump ahead. If you don't want to hear about Rebecca being spoiled, just jump to question number 4. So essentially, some people in the room thought that Rebecca was an abuser who like was manipulative and evil, and the husband was the victim. and other people, myself included, recognized that the second Mrs. De Winther is a very unreliable narrator, and that, Rebecca's, depiction is also quite unreliable from almost anyone who's discussing her, because she's dead, right? So, like, what we hear from the husband, very unreliable. What we hear from, I forget her name, but the servant, the lady that is obsessed with her, all these people are also not reliable. And at the end of the day, this man killed his wife because he thought she was pregnant by another man. I don't know how someone can, like, turn that into, like, oh, he's a victim. But they did. And so we had an amazing conversation debating it and, like, discussing how Rebecca was actually, like, a man, and that's why she was punished in the book and killed, because she was trying to be a man, like having affairs and doing man things. And we also talked about, like, gender identity and how maybe, like, Daphne du Maurier was trans, or like exploring transness in this book. And so this was like a fantastic discussion. So I highly recommend it, because at a minimum, people like to reread it if they've already read it, and also if they haven't read it, like, wow, read it ASAP, So I always think that's the best book club book if you're in a pinch. Alrighty, number 4. Has your book club read a book that was great to read but not great for conversation? So, I mean, I think if you're with literary people, you can still have a great conversation, but to me, the books that end up having the less interesting conversations, I'll say, like, you can still converse, but it's like, okay, are the books that everyone universally thinks was great, and that's a little bit of weird truth, but the thing is that if everyone thinks it's great, it's like, yeah, I think it's great. Oh, me too, me too, me too. Like, what is there to say? But then on the other hand, you want to read great books, right? So it's kind of like a little bit of tension between those two. The one I can think of off the top of my head is the Copenhagen trilogy by Tova. I forget her last name. It starts with a D. Yeah, I forget her name. I can't see the book. Sorry. I'll pop the picture of the cover here so you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so this book is great. It's fantastic. It's like post combined. It was 3 original books, and they put it into one trilogy, into one copy. And it's a memoir of her life, and of this Danish author's life, and how she became a writer, and how she managed motherhood and things like that. And so it's beautifully written, like gorgeously, gorgeously written. And it's just great. Like, there's nothing to critique. I mean, we talked a little bit about, like, working class Danish society. We talked about how, like, you can talk about how poverty in Nordic countries, like, plays out, things like that. Because she grew up very impoverished in Copenhagen, and we can we can talk about her relationship with her husband, but everyone's agreeing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, yeah, her husband's not great. Yeah, it's tough being, like, poor in a very, like, rich area, and so it was just sort of like, it was like, no one was like, oh, I don't think we should have read it, of course, but it also didn't generate as rich of a discussion as other books have in the past, I think. Usually you need at least one person who's like, actually, I didn't like that she did this, or I didn't like this style, or I didn't, whatever. It kind of gives a little tension to the discussion. So, alrighty, number 5. Is there a book you would like your book club to read and discuss? Oh, I didn't really think about this. Okay. You know what I would actually love? I mean, I personally love reading them. That's the thing. A lot of people don't like reading them. But if this is my wish list, so whatever. Any of the, like, weird and wacky books that I love. I think I have a tag on Goodreads where I, like, keep these books, but it's either, like, genre defying, or I call it weird and wacky. I don't remember what I call it. But these books that are just very different. Like, not a typical narrative, not a typical plot arc, not a typical writing style, like, just very different, because I want to talk about, like, the story. Usually I'm like, I can watch a movie for a story, but the writing and the style and, like, that kind of thing is what makes it a book. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean. So yeah, like I'm thinking of like Tentacle by Rita Indiana, or The Iliac Crest by Christina Rivera Garza, I think is her name. You know, just these like, ooh, what is going on here? Like the kind of books where you're like, what is happening until the very end, you know? But yeah, for a couple more specific books that I've read recently that I would love to discuss at book club, Milkman by Anna Burns. I've gushed about that on a previous video, so, but I loved it. I was really surprised by how great it was. And then the other one I just recently finished was Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. Australian Gothic spooky classic, and it's like a mystery at the end. Like her editor, she wrote the book with an ending, like she revealed what happened. Basically these girls go up to they climb a rock and then they disappear. And in the end, she revealed what happened. But then her editor was like, you know what? I think it'd be better if we just like left out the last chapter and just let it like on a cliffhanger. And she was like, rah, 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 okay. And then of course became like a international bestseller because everyone was like, what happened to these girls on the rock, you know? And then like, I think, you know, this was published in like the 60s, and then sometime in the 80s, they finally released that last chapter, and the mystery was solved. But as you're reading, you're like, what's going on? And so if you kind of made a rule that no one finds out what the actual ending was, then you can have a really great discussion, like deciding like what happened, like, you know, this means that it was this, and this means it couldn't have been this, that kind of thing. Because usually like a mystery or a crime novel, like it wraps it up and you find out by the time you finish the book. Whereas this one, you really like didn't know what had happened. So yeah, those kinds of books where like it sort of like invites the conversation, I think it's fantastic. And then number 6, if you can invite an author, dead or alive, to your book club to discuss their body of work, who would it be? So that one, I'm just not sure, because sometimes meeting authors is a real disappointment, unfortunately. So, but who would I be genuinely curious, even if it was a disappointment, like I'd still want to know, kind of thing? I suppose actually like Leo Tolstoy. That might be a weird answer, but he changed so much throughout his writing career, and his novels and works reflect that. So that's the thing. When would I have brought him from? Like, I'm not sure, because he got like very like weird and conservative in the end. So I'm not sure. Like, but yeah, maybe can I have like 4 different Leo Tolstoys, and they all are discussing from their own perspectives, since he's dead and it's like a fantasy anyway, why not, right? Alrighty, so that was the last question. This was super fun. As you might guess by now, I definitely like love book clubs. I love making bookish friends, and I love just discussing books. You know, like when you read a lot of books, sometimes it's like a little difficult to really absorb them if you're not externalizing your ideas, which is literally the main reason I have this channel. As I think pretty much all booktubers do. They want to externalize their thoughts, but it's so much more fun. You know, I mean, I'm talking to a camera right now. It's fine. Like, obviously your comments are great, but in person, book club is so much more engaging and satisfying. So anyway, yeah, I want to hear all about if you're in a book club, and if you're not, like, I'm curious as to why. I think the main reasons, just from the top of my head, and the reasons why I didn't join a book club for a very long time, is because you don't want to read what other people want to read. Like, you want to read, you have your own list of things you want to read, and then that's just sort of like, you're not just that interested in like reading a book just because another group of people is reading it, which is fair. And I definitely think that that's the main obstacle. I definitely want to, I've been trying to start for the longest time, but you know, I would get sick, or it would be a heat wave, or some mishap would happen. But I wanted to start something called a silent book club, and I didn't invent this. This is like a thing where you get together and socialize, and then you just sit around for an hour and you read silently your own book. And so you don't have to show up to a meeting having read the book. You can just come and socialize about books and then go home. And so yeah, if that kind of book club existed where you live, would you go? You know, some people just like being alone and reading. Other people do like the social aspect. I want to hear all your thoughts. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.